To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining our podcast. I'm excited to have you here today. And today with me, I have Beth Woll, who has been with Meier Clinics for over 13 years. And she is a clinician, therapist, master's level therapist at Meier Clinics in Bothell, Washington, and very much a friend of mine and has known my family for years and years and years. So I'm very pleased to be working with you, Beth.
Same here, Lilla. It's a joy.
She's been married for over 35 years.
38 years in August.
38 years in August. And
we have 4 kids and coming up on our 8th grandchild in November.
8th grandchild. Yeah. Oh, on the way.
My pumpkins.
I am Lilla Marie, and I'm the regional director here at the Bothell, Washington Meier Clinics. We work with people from all of the Western states. And so Beth has a really great ministry here at Meier Clinics, and I highly respect and admire Beth. She does come from a ministry background, having been music pastor for many, many years. And
yeah, my husband and I actually did it together as a team, where I directed the choirs and did a lot of singing and ensembles. And my husband is a fabulous pianist, and he did the bands and so on. And so we did it together as a team.
So in your team interactions with your husband, and all the times you've been in ministry, I would suppose that going into the therapy world would have been a natural change for you, a natural shift for you.
I always had an interest in psychology and sociology, especially social psychology was a love of mine. And in fact, First I got a degree in music, and then I ended up loving psychology, sociology so much I got a degree in sociology at the same time. But at some point, I always knew I wanted to go back and get my master's in counseling, which I did after our kids were mostly grown, and then made the transition into clinical counseling here.
Was that, were you able to make that transition from ministry to counseling? Was that easy for you? Was it hard for you?
You know, it's kind of funny you asked that, because I remember as a new intern here talking with Dr. Hartman, and he kind of assessed my background in ministry, working with people, and he said, so we just need to get up your clinical chops. And that's basically what it was. I already had many years of counseling people in ministry. Then I also worked for 3 years as the director of a crisis pregnancy center. And so we did, all of our counselors there were peer counselors. So I was the director for the peer counselors. And then I worked as a pregnancy counselor with New Hope Child and Family Agency, working with the pregnant moms, birth moms, and also the adoptive parents. So I was always in the counseling field in one way or the other, but just got my master's then later in life, and this is my second career.
We all tend to do that.
Yeah.
Thing, don't we?
I decided what I was going to be when I grew up.
Well, the other interesting thing about Beth Woll is that she has co-authored a book with Dr. Meier,
yes.
And it's called Growing Stronger, 12 Guidelines Designed to Turn Your Darkest Hour into Your Greatest Victory. And there's a picture on the front of the book of a woman with her arms upraised and obvious joy and victory. The body language is obvious.
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about what prompted you to write this book, and how you and Dr. Meyer were able to connect to write this book together.
Okay, so the backstory to this book is my own personal crisis and trauma. Long before I became a counselor, when I was still in previous ministry, I actually was a victim of an attack by a young man that we were attempting to help in ministry. And it was a life-threatening situation, very traumatic. And it took me, I did go to some counseling for about 3 months. And then it took me about 4 years to fully recover. It took me about 8 months to even feel safe in the world again. But, I went back to work in 1 week. And I was working at a church at the time. And I discovered, even though I was on staff at a church, these were people that loved me, that cared about their staff. I was well integrated into the church. I realized that I had to look outside the church for ongoing support during my long recovery process, because really there was nothing in place in the church as a safety net to help someone like me. So I realized that we really needed to have some sort of something in place as a safety net to catch women in crisis so they don't fall through the cracks. And like some of them just disappear. They stop coming to church, or they don't get the help that they need, or they just suffer in silence in the pew. So rather than just saying, well, go get counseling, I wanted to make a bridge between counseling and the local church. And that's really what Growing Stronger is all about, how to bring professional help to the church in such a way that women in the church can be trained to support other women in crisis, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. I know that in my life I went through a crisis, and someone was interviewing me for their thesis paper for their master's, and they asked me, what could the church have done to support you during that crisis time? And it stopped me in my tracks. Here I had been a minister in the church for years, and had served in every kind of position in the church except for head pastor, senior pastor. And I had no idea the answer to that question. So this is really a necessary bridging to have happen. Now, do the people who are leading the groups, are they lay? Are they professionals? How does that structure work?
Well, the way it works, it can just be, it's a ministry of women for women. So it can be any woman in the church that really is a mature Christian woman who has a heart to help other women in crisis. So it could be a women's ministry pastor. It could be just a lay person who's a mature leader in the church. And then we always want an assistant leader to come alongside her, so she's got a partner, because you're dealing with people in crisis, right? And then we bring alongside the professional piece, which is the therapist who comes in to support those leaders. And the format we have set up in Growing Stronger is that it's a weekly group that begins, first of all, it's in a home. It meets in a home. It starts with a meal where these women are nurtured and somebody else is cooking for them. They don't have to cook.
Oh, that's a dream.
It is a dream. And many times these women are thrust into a crisis because maybe their marriage is falling apart. So they're in the work world, maybe for the first time. They're a single parent, whatever. So to come to a home where somebody's taking care of them, nurturing them, is a big deal. And so they can sit around table and have fellowship. And then after the meal, we move into a book study, and we recommend using the 12 chapters involved in Growing Stronger as the first book study, and then after that move into other books that are helpful in personal development. So, and then after the book study, then individual prayer for each person there for their particular needs. Then once a month, the therapist comes in and leads the group and helps with the particular needs of those individuals, and then models also for the leader how to lead a group like this with women in crisis. And then once a month, the leader makes herself available. The therapist makes herself available to the leader, so the leader can debrief with a therapist about what's going on with the group. that also gives the opportunity for the therapist to help with triaging in case there's somebody in the group that needs intensive counseling or maybe needs a referral to a psychiatrist because they need medication, they're in clinical depression or whatever's going on. Or maybe there's some domestic violence and the leader needs to know when to call 911. Or even if there's a group member who might be suicidal, how to handle that. So these are the professional issues that the therapist can help so that it's not overwhelming to the leader in the church.
Well, and I can think of, secondary trauma
Right.
for that leader.
Absolutely.
If that leader is not getting some way to work through and some normalization of some of these kinds of incidences that we may deal with on a regular basis, they may not be exposed to all that often.
Exactly.
And having guidance, I think, would be incredibly crucially important.
It is important. And so in addition to meeting once a month with the group itself and then meeting once a month with a leader, the therapist remains available on call to the leader if she needs to check in, hey, this is going on, because the leader is really on, boots on the ground, with these women.
On the front line.
Absolutely, because she's in the same church. She's doing life for these people.
Right.
And what we find in these groups is, we actually have a group that's been going now for, my goodness, about 12 years, our pilot group.
Okay.
And after about 9 years, I participated for 9 years. After 9 years, it started going off on its own, right? And I went to them, my last session there, and said to the group members, what has been most helpful to you? And over they said, I needed a safe place where I could just come, and they actually used the word vomit more than once. It's like, I just needed to vomit out my story where I wouldn't be judged, where I could just pour out my pain and I would be received and loved in a safe place. And that was the beginning point of their healing, because when someone's gone through a trauma like I did and like you did, we use the term unspeakable. It's unspeakable horror. It's unspeakable pain. And so what do we do when something's unspeakable? We shut up, right?
Right.
But if we have a place where we are safe and we are loved, then we are free to open up and even share those things that are so unspeakable. And then it creates tremendous bonding, a place of belonging, and a place where then we can heal while we're still attending church. We don't have to stop going or just hide under the pew somewhere.
Right. So often in churches, we're encouraged to go to the front for prayer if we're going through. And I don't know how many times I've gone down to the front to pray with someone who's just weeping and weeping and weeping, and thought to myself, where else can this person go if the only place that they feel safe to weep is at the front altar of the church?
Exactly.
And that takes even great strength to go forward to get prayer.
Oh my goodness.
Let alone someone who's in horrible pain or in trauma, sitting in the pew and not able to even point their feet towards the altar in the front.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Dr. Meyer of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
And so that brings in another piece of the Growing Stronger puzzle, and that is the pastor. Because the pastor, first of all, gives their blessing for this program to be in the church. But secondly, the pastor has his or her finger on the pulse of the needs of his people or her people. And so when they recognize someone like this who's really in crisis, they can say to the leader of the Growing Stronger group, we've got a place for you, and they can connect the leader with that person. Many times pastors will do counseling. They'll do pastoral counseling for 1 or 2 sessions, or they may even have a counselor on staff at the church who will do ongoing care. But this is not a substitute for counseling. This is an adjunct to it, and really helps hold the person's hand as they walk through daily life. And it might involve the members of the group start helping each other too,
Right.
providing childcare for each other,
Uh-huh.
or doing laundry or cooking meals for each other. It's beautiful to see how they really bond in these relationships.
And studies show, I just read the other day, that more and more in our society, we're becoming more depressed and more anxious. And the reason that they're finding behind that is we're losing our connections. And the studies, I've been done about, I think, 10, 15 years ago, were showing that we need between 3 to 5 close people in our circle that we can tell them anything, and we know that we're not going to be judged. And that kind of a group obviously would be a primary source for some of these women who may be feeling disconnected.
Oh my.
I know I was talking to a young mom the other day, and she was just in tears saying, when I get together with a group, I don't want to talk about being a mother. I want to be a person.
That's right. Give me talk grown up talk.
And she wasn't even really in trauma.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Well, trauma is isolating when you think about it, because when you're going through a trauma, you tend to just kind of clam up, and your body goes into shock, and your emotions go into shock. And a person can feel too that they're disconnected from God. Like, maybe God doesn't love me even because this happened, right? But being in a safe, loving group can help to really relieve that isolation.
Yeah. And then that's been shown. Absolutely shown in scientifically, so that can't be looked away. To change gears just a little bit,
Sure.
Mary Beth, now this did come out of an experience in your life.
Yes.
And your desire to go into counseling came out of experience in your life. Can you tell me how the Lord has supported you in this time and into the experience of learning how to be a therapist?
Sure. So let me just say that my desire to be a therapist did not come out of this trauma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was something, I was one of those kids. My parents tell me, even when I was young, I was the kid that everybody came to tell their life story. I'm the person that goes to get gas, and the gas station attendant tells me their life story, right? Or the waitress, whatever. So it's always been something I've had a predisposition for, I believe a gifting and a calling for. And in fact, I didn't go to grad school until after I had gone through this healing process from the trauma. But what I felt was that as I came into the profession of counseling as what some would call the wounded healer, before that experience, I pretty much had kind of a Pollyanna life, raised as a preacher's kid in a loving home, loved being a PK, loved being in the middle of everything. But once I had experienced this devastation in my own life, I found out that my clients really could relate to me. They knew I'd been there, done that, and survived. And not only did I survive, but I thrived. And in my own personal healing, as I said, I went to counseling for about 3 months, actually with a Meier Clinic counselor. And that was very helpful. But it was more like getting me stabilized again. But long term, I met with a little grandma lady in her living room who is just the most amazing inner healing prayer counselor. She met with me every 2 weeks for 4 years.
Wow.
We took the summers off, but and she did it for free.
Wow.
And she taught me how to do inner healing prayer counseling. So I do incorporate that with my clients who are Christians and who have experienced trauma. And I also learned a therapy called lifespan integration, which is a timeline therapy. And so if clients are Christian, I can incorporate lifespan integration and inner healing prayer together, called the healing timeline. And if they're not Christians, they don't want to incorporate spirituality, we can still do the timeline therapy. And it's the most amazing. I actually see people recover from trauma very quickly. It took me 4 years. Honestly, now I understand it doesn't have to take that long.
Wow. Okay. That's so powerful. You triggered me again for another study that I had read, and it's been proven again, about taking time out to pray, whatever that prayer time looks like. If that looks like meditation for somebody, if that looks for a quiet time, if that looks for actual prayer to a deity, God in our case, right?
Yes.
Jesus.
Jesus Christ. Yes.
But even people who spend some time in yoga daily will experience healing much more quickly in their lives. And that's obviously proving so in your therapeutic work here at Meier Clinics.
Yes. So people come to me and they say, well, I'm not a Christian. Is that okay? Will you still be my therapist? I'm like, sure. I say, the way I see it is that we are body, soul, and spirit. And Dr. Dobson once said that because we're body, soul, and spirit, one can easily catch the ills of the other. Right. So if I see, to quote one of my other favorite people, Joyce Meier says, you are a spirit, you have a soul, and you live in a body.
Yes.
And so if I have clients who are not Christians, I say, listen, we've got a lot to work on in the body and the soul, even without the spirit.
Yeah.
But is it okay with you because I'm a Christian, is it okay with you if I share something from my Christian perspective that I think is relevant toward your situation? And you can say yes and you can say no. And it's really interesting because very often they'll say, oh, yeah, that's okay, because they want to be tolerant, right? So, and so
that's a little sneaky there.
Yeah. But and I'm very serious when I say, and you could say yes and say no, and I absolutely will not bring it up. But what I find is that once you develop that loving, caring relationship, people have questions about God, and they'll ask.
Yeah, I think I found that as well in my own practice with the people that I work with who are not Christian. They get curious.
Yeah, that's right.
Once they find that, hey, I'm not being judged.
Yes.
Oh, maybe Christianity is a little different than I thought it was.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that has been a joy working with you, Mary Beth, has been your ability to be open and transparent with me, and I've really enjoyed that friendship with you.
Oh, thank you. Same here, Lilla. It's been wonderful. Really loved your transparency with me too, and I think we learn and grow that way, right?
Right.
And to a certain extent, we can share some of that self-disclosure with our clients when we've already been there, done that,
right?
And we can say,
look,
this is how we got through that, know, and that gives them great hope.
Great hope
as well. You asked about how.
Oh yeah, how did you and Dr. Meyer work together, meet to even do this book together?
This was a miracle. So years ago, I wrote a little 50-page handbook that outlined what we had done with our pilot group, the initial Growing Stronger group. So I wrote a little handbook so that other people could replicate this model. And a couple years after that, Dr. Paul Meier and his sister Nancy Brown came to have a meeting with our staff. It took us out for dinner. And I happened to sit across the table from Nancy, and she asked about my passion and specialty in counseling. So I told her, and she said, well, if you ever want to write a book with Paul, he loves to do that with therapists. So the team from corporate were staying overnight to have board meetings the next day. So the next morning, I grabbed my little handbook, gave it to Nancy. She handed it to Paul later. He read it on the plane on his way back to Texas, emailed me from the plane and said, I love it. How can I help?
Oh, that's amazing.
So he said, I
wonderful.
can write a foreword, I can write an endorsement, or I can be a full-fledged co-author. I said, will you be my co-author? Yes. So we did it long distance email and a couple phone calls here and there between Seattle and Texas there.
What a great experience.
Mm-hmm. It was, really was. It was a joy. He's a delight to work with. Mm-hmm.
Mary Beth, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, just I would really love to speak to 3 different types of people out there. First is the woman in crisis. Just to know that God is still there. His everlasting arms are still under you. He's not going to let you go. He's not going to let you fall. And he does have people there to help you through this. And then I'd like to speak to the women in churches who have a heart for women in crisis, but they don't know what to do to help them. They want to reach out. They know they're gifted and called to this, but they feel overwhelmed by what can I even do to get started? I want you to know that there is such a program called Growing Stronger that you can implement in your church that will give you the structure and the leadership and the support to help women, so you can use the gifting and calling that God's given you to comfort those in crisis. Because really, all of us have times of crisis where we end up at the side of the road in a heap, but we can be part of that pit crew that comes and helps and puts the wheels back on and gives the engine whatever it needs so that get back on the road again. And that's the whole goal of Growing Stronger, is to make it through that crisis and to grow stronger, come out better than ever. I know that God's done that in my life. I would never want to go through that crisis again, but I know that I'm a better person because what God's done in me as a result of it.
Right.
And then thirdly, I'd like to speak to therapists out there who have a heart like me to interface with the churches, to say, what can I do to support someone in the church so that we can make this bridge? And just to let you know that Growing Stronger is available. If you have questions about that, you can feel free to talk to me, contact the Meier Clinic, and they can connect you with me. If you want to get this prototype going in your area, I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so if you have some questions, feel free to give us a call at 425-487-1005, and you can ask for Mary Beth.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.